CALPADS Error Resolution CERT128, Missing Absent Summary Data for Student. Like always, the first step when troubleshooting CALPADS error is to consult the CALPADS error list. From left to right, you can see the error number and the error name column. These fields are used to identify your error. You're going to use the error list as a reference, and you're going to identify the error that's triggering on your data from the CALPADS certification details screen. The error description identifies the problem. Each student who has an SENR record with an enrollment status of primary or short-term in grades KN through 12 must have an associated STAS record, Student Absence Summary, for the same school and academic year. Now, the suggested resolution will help you identify the problem. Sometimes this column also features a section called Understanding the Error, which identifies the expectations in CALPADS. There are two suggested resolutions. One, you verify the enrollment status and grade level code for the student to make sure that it's correct. Two, ensure the STAS record is submitted for the student for the same academic year. And so we're going to be comparing in our demonstration the STAS data, which has been identified as missing, and the student enrollment data, which sets the criteria of requirement. Okay? And so one thing you can do to identify why this error is triggering is look at your reference documentation in CALPADS. And anytime you're talking about required data missing, the CALPADS CFS forms is a great document, as well as the CALPADS CFS doc, right? And so we have an image of the CALPADS CFS doc. It's a Word document. And at the bottom, you can see a section is highlighted, right? And so on the left, we've kind of made it easier for you to read. And it tells you data to be included, right? For student absent summary data, all students with a primary or short-term enrollment, that's enrollment status 10 and 30, and those who are enrolled grades KN through 12. So these are the students who are included in the data collection for end of year 3, right? And so all of these students are required to have the STAS data submitted for them. And as you can see, there are no exceptions for those two enrollment status in the grades. And so being that we are in a new environment, unprecedented times, we're all living through COVID-19, right? Specific guidance has been provided for how to handle STAS reporting in this altered school environment. And there was plenty of school closures, and as part of a COVID FAQ, the CDE has mandated guidance to kind of guide us through these times, right? The data is still required, legislation still demands it, you know, students still have needs, and so we have to do our part. So if you reference Flash 78, and you can see that this excerpt also references Flash 173 and 175, which came prior to 178, so that's really good information in those flashes. However, you can see specific guidance was given, right? And there's 2 bullet points. One says, adjust expected attendance days to align with the new date the LEA elected to use for the emergency school closure. So as of February 29th, STAS records were not required, right? So typically you have 180 school day calendar, and you probably lost 60 days due to the closure, maybe. That's just a rough estimate on my part, right? It varies from district to district. And so you have the option as of February 29th for that to be, you know, or somewhere around that time, whenever your school decided to close or your district decided to close, to modify the expected attendance days and adjust the calendar. Because we don't want it to be punitive for the students who had trouble if you opened online classes, or if you didn't open online classes, you don't give them 3 months of absences, right? Populate student absent summary data collection exemption indicator with the Y for any student who enrolled after February 29th, 2020, or after the emergency school closure date. Since LEAs must submit STAS records for every student who was primarily enrolled, a fatal error will trigger, that's the CERT128, for students who do not have STAS records. Okay, so that's the specific guidance that was provided to us in Flash 178. The link is provided. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom and find this excerpt. And that flash message came from the COVID guidance that was provided by the CDE. Then the CALPADS department kind of gave you more specific guidance in how to report the students, okay? And so the COVID FAQs for CALPADS, there's a link down at the bottom, right? And there's more information, there's more background, right? And some of the main points when reporting these students and resolving the CERT128 is that, one, in line with ADA reporting requirements, STAS data is only required up to February 29th. That's for all students, right? If attendance was collected, STAS data may be submitted past February 29th. So if you maintain your attendance reporting procedures, you can submit your STAS records even if they extend beyond February 29th. The total number of expected attendance should be adjusted appropriately, right? So you're going to adjust the expected attendance days to reflect the modified school calendar. And so the specific guidance given to how to report the STAS in Flash 178 came from a larger set of guidance related to the COVID. And so CALPADS has a COVID-19 FAQ webpage, okay? And in general, the overall guidance we've summarized in 4 bullet points here. And this will help you resolve CERT 128 or report your STAS records. And then lastly, students enrolled during school closures may have an exemption indicator in the STAS record. So if the district was still accepting enrollments for students that came after February 29th, you can simply indicate they have an exemption in the STAS record. And remember that an exemption does not mean exclusion. They still need to have the STAS record reported. You just indicate it by marking the exemption indicator, or through a batch file, put a yes in that column and leaving all the other fields blank. And so with that, we're going to demonstrate exactly what we just described. We're going to help you resolve CERT 128, and we're going to walk you through a scenario in which the COVID-19 might affect a student's data and why you have a CERT 128. In this demonstration, we're going to show you how to resolve a CERT 128 error. This is an end of year 3 error, and it triggers when a student is missing absent summary data. So if you don't know by now, we're on the certification detail screen. You click the show button for any of these errors, and the student information is revealed down below. I've already clicked the button prior to the demo to have it prepped and ready. However, it does take a moment. So you can click the student's SSID button. What I like to do is right click it, and I have the option to open the link in a new tab or in a new window. And what that will do is allow me to preserve this screen so I could come back and reference other errors in student data, while in the new tab, look at the student details. So here's the student detail screen, and you can see all the elements of the student's profile. So I can see, let's find the student absent summary data, and there is data here. There's actually some data for the 1920 year, right? But don't let that fool you, because the error is triggering for Strathmore Union Elementary. And we can see that the student has an enrollment, but there's no STAS record for the LEA. So let's look at the error and see why specifically it's triggering. So here's the CALPADS error list, and we use CERT 128, the error number, and the error name to reference the error. Now the error description is really a description of the problem. This will tell us what the issue is. And it says, each student who has a SENR record with an enrollment status of primary or short-term in grades K through 12 must have an associated STAS record for the same school and academic year. So now we understand what our problem is, right? We have a student who either has a primary or short-term enrollment and they don't have a STAS record. Over here, the suggested resolution gives us some hints on how to resolve this error. 1, you can verify the enrollment status and grade level code are correct. 2, ensure the STAS record is submitted for the student for the same school and academic year. So here's the fields of validation. The fields of validation tell us what may trigger the error, what we need to look for comparison, or where the discrepancy may lie, okay? So when we're looking at the STAS record, we're looking for the school of attendance, the academic year, and the SSID to match the student enrollment data for the school of attendance, academic year, and SSID. Other potential reasons why this error trigger, again, is the enrollment status code, primary or short term, and grade level, KN through 12, okay? So let's drag this out of here. And so we verified that our Strathmore Union Elementary School enrollment has no STAS record. There is no corresponding STAS, okay? And so either A, this is a secondary enrollment and we can correct the enrollment status. So we could change the enrollment status, and you would do that by opening the record and you'd find the enrollment status. And if it's a secondary enrollment, that's fine. And if it's a short-term enrollment, you would still have to have a STAS, right? So primary and short-term enrollments would have to have a STAS. Secondary enrollment. Now, you'd only change the enrollment if it was a mistake, right? But if you indeed have a primary enrollment here, you have to report a STAS. You have to. And so there's a couple things going on in this example. We can see that this is a concurrent enrollment, right? Because this student was exited on 6/4/2020, but the enrollment started here. So it's possible that one of the resolutions could be to delete this record. Again, you'd open the record, find out that you submitted the enrollment as a mistake, and delete the record. That's the solution. However, assuming that the enrollment record is correct, what you're going to need to do is add a new STAS record, right? And you would just populate the fields that you have. Now, being that we are in the pandemic era and we're dealing with the COVID-19 situation, you may not have STAS data for this student. And CALPADS is telling you you need a record, right? Well, how do you fix this? We can see that this is 4/27/2020, right? So you would come down here, you'd add a new record, and you would say that the student was exempt. Now, being that the student is exempt, we're going to validate the record. And post. So now, you can see that it says it was successful. We can see the Strathmore exempt record, right? So we satisfy the requirement to have a record. However, we didn't account for the enrollment period because during the COVID situation, we may have not tracked the. So based on the CDE's guidance, the collection of STAS data after February is not expected. And so you can go to the CALPADS flash messages, and it's flash 173 that will give you guidance on the expectation. So down here at the bottom, you can see the collection of chronic absenteeism data in CALPADS through the student attendance summary files based on the attendance data LEAs collect for apportionment purposes. And the CDE is not requiring any changes to how attendance data is collected. Therefore, LEAs are not expected to collect attendance for chronic absenteeism purposes during school closures, even if distance learning instruction is occurring. And so this statement that I just read is telling you that the CDE is not expecting to collect attendance data during school closures, right? And so in that instance, you have a late enrollment. If it's not an error, you can go ahead and use that exemption indicator for the student, right? You're meeting the requirement for reporting the STAS record. However, for the time period, the student is exempt, okay? And so if you are wanting more information as far as how the coronavirus is going to impact your reporting, the CDE has FAQs, right, for the 2019 novel coronavirus. And the guidance that I read from the flash message is based on number 9. Are schools required to take daily attendance of distance learning students, right? And it tells you that, among other things, average daily attendance will be based on school months from July to February 29th for the 18-19 academic year. So as far as CALPADS and STAS, after February 29th, it's optional for you to track your students' absence summary data. If it's the easiest thing for you to do, if you've been tracking their attendance even in a different environment, as many districts have offered education in a virtual situation, that's fine. If you've tracked your attendance and you have it for the entire year, there's no downfall to reporting the data. However, since the learning environment changed for practically every student in the entire state, you don't want it to be punitive, and so you don't have to. It's optional after February 29th to report that STAS data. And so that student who was enrolled on April 27th, it's perfectly legitimate and valid to report that student with the exempted STAS record. All right, well, hopefully this will help you all. And I should say this, a traditional CERT128, you would have to populate the record with absence and attendance data. But since it's exempted, we left those fields blank. So again, hopefully this will help you guys out and you'll be better equipped to tackle any CERT128s that come your way.